Hello, listeners. Welcome to season 2 of the Masters Decoded podcast. I am Manish Merchant, the chief decoder. I want to thank you for the overwhelming response to season 1. Your feedback and encouragement led me to bring you season 2 of the Masters Decoded. The season will tap into how technology, artificial intelligence, and other socioeconomic factors have impacted my guest careers or passions. My first guest on season 2 is Renée Cummings. Renée is a criminologist, criminal psychologist, therapeutic jurisprudence specialist, AI ethicist, and the historic first data activist in the residence at the School of Data Science, University of Virginia. Renée is also a community scholar at Columbia University. Renée specializes in AI risk management, justice oriented AI, social justice AI, AI policy and governance, and AI to save lives. She is committed to using AI to empower and transform communities by helping governments and organizations navigate the AI landscape and develop future AI leaders. I have personally learned a lot about ethics in AI, and without much further ado, let me get on with it. Hi, Renée. Welcome to Masters Decoded second season. Lucky to have you on board.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise. And when I was looking at your profile, I was pretty intrigued and wanted to get you on the show because you have an amazing diversity from a profile perspective. And it's actually the need of the hour today, what the world is going through. You are a criminologist, you are an activist in data and AI, you have a lot of focus on justice system, you have to, many things going on. And you have focus on data but also focus on the human aspect also, which may not include data. So how did that all come together for you? Would love to start off with that.
Oh, well, certainly. So I'm a criminologist and a criminal psychologist, and I also specialize in therapeutic jurisprudence. So as a criminologist, I deal with everything that focuses on lawmaking, law breaking, and law enforcing. As a criminal psychologist, I go into the mind of an individual and look at the background and foreground factors that may make someone commission a particular type of crime. So with criminal psychology, I focus on investigative psychology, forensic psychology, behavioral analysis, a little bit of psychiatry in there, and a lot of policing. So it's a lot about profiling, psychological profiling, environmental profiling. I always say the crime scene speaks to the pathology of the perpetrator. When it comes to therapeutic jurisprudence, I spent a lot of time working in rehabilitation and reentry, corrections, and looking at how we can assist individuals who have ended up on the wrong side of the law to get back on the right side of society. And it's a very difficult process that needs a lot of skill sets to bring people back because we all deserve a second chance, and many of us need many chances before we actually are able to make it. And I think all of that is what brought me to artificial intelligence, because what we were seeing in AI from about 2016 were some of the biggest challenges and mistakes in AI were being made in the criminal justice system with the risk assessment scores, these algorithmic decision making systems that were predicting risk and were really racially biased and unfair against Black and Brown defendants. And as a criminologist and someone looking at the application of algorithmic decision systems, particularly among juveniles and its deployment in marginalized communities and vulnerable communities, I realized that something needed to be said. And criminologists needed to enter the space because if you want to design an algorithm, instead of designing something that is opaque or something that overestimates risk or something that frustrates due process, maybe if those data scientists had collaborated with criminologists and criminal psychologists and therapeutic jurisprudence specialists and other individuals engaged at different levels of the criminal justice system, they would have found something more accurate. They would have found something more transparent, something more accountable, and they would have been able to really deliver something that was more equitable. And that's what justice is all about. So I think in
Yep.
speaking about that a lot, I started to move into all those many topics that AI ethics was looking at that moment. And in doing that, I think my point of view became so distinct and so diverse that I just brought a different look and interpretation to data. And that comes to my history in law enforcement, because for the
Mm-hmm.
last 15 years, I've focused on homicide reduction, gang and gun violence, and how to reduce violence in societies. And
Yep.
much of that brought me to police statistics and homicide statistics. And every time I looked at a homicide statistic, I didn't just see one individual who was
Mm-hmm.
dead. I saw generations and I saw families and I saw how do these things impact communities? How does homicide impact the family, the
Mm-hmm.
community, the society? And
Yep.
it really started me thinking about through data how
Mm.
much trauma is located in data. And it's one of the things that we're seeing with data right now, that whole concept of data collection,
Yep.
annotation,
Mm-hmm.
classification,
Yep.
analysis. All of these things have in them an inherent power structure. I say data is cultural, data is
Yep.
political, data is social.
Mm.
It's not only about economies of scale. So I think all of that came together. And I think just in general, all my life, I've been committed to change and to social change and to justice. I began my career as a journalist and I
Wow.
worked as a journalist for some time, and then I went into broadcasting, and I worked at a broadcast. I also was a sports commentator, and I was actually the first female on-camera sports presenter in the
Wow.
Caribbean. So
Okay.
I've had a very diverse history, and I think I bring that interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspective to artificial intelligence. Now, I love AI. I love the
Mm.
technology. I love the potential of this technology, and I'm very passionate about it,
Okay.
using it to save lives. Because this is something that is so real time, so immediate, so expansive,
Mm.
so pervasive, so powerful, but it
Yeah.
could be something that's very dangerous.
I
And
agree.
that's where we need that balance. And I
Hmm.
think that's who I am. I'm there to balance the seesaw.
Nice. And we wish that there can be many more like you, because that is the need of the hour today. As you know, AI becomes more relevant and more real in the real world, rather than just in labs. And 2020 actually has proven that many of those AI applications are coming into life. But before we talk about your current work and focus on how you have moved from very focused on criminal justice, which you currently do, to being more focused on AI. Let's rewind a bit, and you spoke about your initial career, about being a journalist and being a sports commentator, first female on camera in Caribbean. So how did that all start after your undergrad or after your grad? Like, did you want to become a journalist, or was it something you landed up accidentally?
Well, you know what? It was actually straight out of high school, and one of the things that I
Wow. Okay.
loved doing was writing. And
Okay.
I'm a creative writer, and I always say I write nonfiction, and that's what I
Hmm.
love. It's an area that I absolutely love. I love telling stories. I
Hmm.
love telling stories. And I think that is what took me into journalism, the ability to tell stories. And I believe stories can change lives, because every life has a story that could be a lesson for someone else to learn. And while I was doing my print journalism, there was an opening at a new television station. So the other thing about me is I like to take risks and I like to do
Nice.
new things. So I didn't know anything about broadcasting, but I was young. I was
Hmm.
eager, I was interested, and I knew that I had the energy. And I decided to do that. And then when
Hmm.
I started to work as a television reporter, just covering, crime, government, social issues, community issues, I realized that I had this love for sport, because my father has a background in sport, in soccer,
Okay.
and an international background in soccer. And I always felt that in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm
Hmm.
born, and so many women in sport, why wasn't there a woman on air at 7 p.m. as part of the nightly newscast reading sport? And I just said I was going to do it. And
Hmm.
really and truly, I learned so much when it came to uh, myself
Hmm.
and about leadership, because sport is one of those places where you are able to learn in real time, because
Yep.
sport demands so much of an individual. So in telling those stories about some of the greatest sports personalities in the world, and I was able to interview some of the best, from just everything from
Yep.
cricket to soccer to rugby to gymnastics, just all the best. And when
Hmm.
you hear their life stories about determination and
Hmm.
perseverance and failure and
Yep.
loss, the things that we often see is success and people smiling, but we
Yep.
have to know the pain and the trauma and the tears that often brings them there. So I think it is in sport where I really came into my own and really build this capacity for justice and for social justice. So I think those early days,
Hmm.
being on the beat and telling those stories made me realize how powerful a word is,
Yep.
how powerful one word is.
Well
And
said.
sometimes, in a fleeting moment, while you're looking at the news, you may hear something, and that one thing that you hear changes the trajectory of your life forever.
I do watch some sports, whether it's cricket or whether it's soccer today, and I'm just awed with all the commentators because one, it's catching those small moments and making it big, and at the same time saying things which connect people to that sports because you know the one thing which is so unique about sports is across the world that's the only thing which gets people united in many ways uh, and largely while people appreciate the players, nobody gets to appreciate so much about the commentators as well because they actually make the game exciting. If you're watching it on TV, if you're watching it live, that's a different story altogether. But if you're watching it on TV, what's connecting you to the real life scenario is the commentator. And that bridge, that connection is often
And
forgotten.
what the commentators do is they give you that backstory. And I
Hmm.
think that's what I do with AI and with data science. I give you
Yeah.
the backstory, the lives that are being impacted, the communities that
Hmm.
are being impacted, the legacies that are being created, how false narratives last for
Mm-hmm.
a very long time. And it's really important to get that backstory. And I think that is what sports journalism gave me. Always find out what else is happening. And it really comes back to uh, the mind of the individual. And it
Yeah.
requires a unique amount of strength. When you see someone on the court, so
Mm-hmm.
when you see a Serena Williams playing, it's
Yeah.
just not only the move, it is
Yeah.
all that is going on in the mind to create that move. And I remember reading the autobiography of Michael Jordan of the NBA, and he
Mm-hmm.
said something that was very instructive. He said many of the moves that he made on the court that just blew the world away because we had never seen anyone do that in basketball. He said
Mm-hmm.
99% of those moves were created in his head while he was lying down before he fell asleep. 99% of it was already done in his head. The 1% was just the execution of
Execution.
doing it on the court. And that
Yeah.
really made me think, about who we are and how we develop and the things that we can do. So when I entered AI, I said, this is a place of greatness, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a place where we could do a lot of harm if we don't bring that rigorous and robust ethical perspective, and we don't build an ethical resilience from children, from
Mm-hmm.
from babies understanding this technology, because AI is a new language. It's
Yep.
our new language. This is the language that we are going to be speaking in for generations to come, and it's only going to become more sophisticated. So you need people like me to demystify the data, to deconstruct the data, to
Yes.
disrupt the data, and bring that sense of justice to data. Because if we don't pay attention, certain things are going to happen, and it may be
Hmm.
too late for us to pull back and then push back against it.
Yeah. And someone today asked me, how do you explain ethics in AI? And just give them a simple analogy. If you take a syringe and give it to a doctor or give it to a terrorist, it's a tool. It can be life saving or it can be causing issues for people around. Is It's not the tool which is a problem here. It's actually the people behind it and people who are using it. I don't know if you agree to that statement because you are so
Well,
much in.
you're right. It's about the ethical application of it.
Hmm.
The technology in itself is not dangerous. The
Yeah.
technology in itself is something that's amazing because a mind created this. And this is
Hmm.
a technology that has so much promise. What
Yeah.
happens is the application of the technology. But what also happens is in the creation of the technology, if the data scientists or the developers of this technology do not have that diverse perspective or do not understand the power of inclusivity or do
Hmm.
not understand the need for equity, then they can create something consciously or unconsciously that is dangerous. And it may be
Mm.
too late for them to pull it back once it's been deployed. So, this
Yeah.
is why it's critical in that conceptualization stage of technology and all new and emerging technologies, not just only AI, to have that multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary perspective for intellectual confrontation because we must be comfortable and courageous enough to confront each other intellectually on the things that we are creating. Because I
Hmm.
always say technology leaves legacies. And
Yep.
we have got to ask ourselves, what is the legacy that we want to leave? Do we want to disempower or we want to empower? We've got to ask ourselves, what is the world we want to create? And the thing about this is we have a history
Hmm.
of all the things
Yeah.
that have made this world not a good place. But yet we
A lot
also
of
have a
perceptions
history.
too, and a
Yeah?
lot of perceptions too.
Yeah, we also have a history of all the great things that have been done. So,
Hmm.
were we to replicate those great things and enhance those great things and build upon those great things, what an amazing world can we build? If we
Yeah.
were to use new technology to replicate old biases, inequalities,
Hmm. Wow.
who wants to build that world?
Everyone. But and just trying to look at the stream of work you are because you're living it every day. Today, when you talk about criminal justice, there are jurors, there are people who are, the attorneys, and then you have the judge, who are each building their own perceptions. How much data really plays a big game in that? Because today, law is one thing, you know, it's, I always believe that maybe my misconception, it's a statement, but that statement can be construed in many different ways because that's how people leverage it. I would use that word in, making something right or wrong or prove something right or wrong. How does data really play a role in that in your mind? Today data is being used extensively, but it can be dangerous or it can do good as well.
Well, data is critical to criminal justice. The criminal justice system is built on data, some of it actually being very inaccurate, some of it being biased and discriminatory, and much of it being really infused negatively with things like systemic racism. So data is critical. In the criminal justice system, from policing, data is critical. What do the police do? They do things like predictive analytics,
Hmm.
hotspot policing, environmental environmental criminology, all of these things, intelligence-led criminology, intelligence-led policing, data-driven policing. All of these are critical to policing. Policing is about the data. When they look at the data, they know where to put the cops, right? What we call cops on dots. So you have a grid, you see where your crime is happening, and you put your office. It's about resources as well, but it's also about bringing an ethical approach to the ways in which we police, because what we are seeing is much of the predictive analytics being used in policing are really not being applied with an ethical framework. When
Yeah.
it comes to sentencing, we're seeing risk scores being used in the criminal justice system to decide who is at risk, who is not at risk, who is a
Yeah.
risk to public safety, who do we incarcerate, who do we
Mm.
parole. So we're seeing all of that. But also, when it comes to the law, data is critical because lawyers have to deal with a lot of data. So
Yeah.
AI gives them the potential to collate data and to look at data in real time and to be much more resourceful when it comes to the application of data to the law, the practice of the law, the methodology, the
Mm.
writings, the bulk of information and cases that lawyers have to look at for precedent. So you find something like an algorithm could really in real time tell you these are all the cases that have looked at this particular matter. These are all of the judgments in that matter.
Yep.
These are the judgments on which you can build your argument. So lawyers can use it in a positive way for great advantage to make themselves more effective and more efficient. So that whole question of data bringing more efficiency to the criminal justice system is something that is real and something that must be explored and something that must be advanced, but
Mm.
within an ethical framework. So, what we need are our criminal justice professionals having a solid and comprehensive understanding of algorithms and
Wow.
AI and the application of this technology and understanding transparency and accountability, explainability, auditability. We need those impact assessments. We need to audit those algorithms. We've got to look at things like equity. We've got to look at privacy and security. So, what we're seeing in the criminal justice system, because of the technology being used by the police, many cases are now coming into that space that are looking at data as a way of collecting evidence, data as a way of looking at investigations. But much of the
Wow.
tools and the techniques that are being used are really being done with a certain amount of secrecy because these things have not been ventilated publicly. Much of it not been
Yeah.
up for public procurement, have been designed by third-party vendors. So we're seeing the law and the whole justice space really now starting to grapple with these concepts of algorithms and bias and why, an inclusion, its perspective is critical to the designing of that. So it's a great space that's now looking at the ways in which we need to move forward. But what we're
Hmm.
also seeing is that there needs to be an education in the criminal justice system. So it's not just we know there's this great tool out there, we buy it from a vendor, the vendor sells us a promise, and then we start using this willy nilly in the criminal justice system. That's not how it's done. You need to understand from that whole position of procurement, what are you procuring?
Mm.
What are the risks of this technology when we
And how
apply this
accurate it is.
techno how accurate when we apply it in a particular space, are we further marginalizing communities, are we
Yep.
further victimizing groups? So there's a lot of learning, and I think that's why I just love the space that I'm in now, because I'm part of that teaching and I'm also learning as well.
It's such an important, and as you're speaking, in my mind is just spinning wheels right now because there is so much to do in a short time because it's like a snowball which has dropped from the mountain and it's catching up steam. But you, and I'm sure you may have team or you may have other individuals who are trying to focus on this topic more and more. But one question which comes in my mind, when an algorithm is already deployed, how do you bring ethics in that? Because it's already in system. Like you said, there is either marginalization happening, There is either targeting happening on a certain level, which may not be known to individuals who are using it or leveraging it. They may, in their own naive means, maybe using that, thinking that it is right. So how do you go about doing that? And this is not just true within criminal justice, it's true within corporate sector as well. Whether it looks at hiring people, firing people, evaluating customers, evaluating many things. How do you bring in ethics when systems are already in place?
Well, the first thing we've got to ensure is that those systems are not in place before there's an ethical approach to it. So we go back to the design and development. So that's what we want to do. We want to know that moving forward, we are bringing an ethical approach to the design, development, and deployment of algorithms. Now, if
Mm-hmm.
something is already out there, an algorithm is something that you can consistently refine. You can
Yeah.
refine an algorithm. So if you have put something out there and you're realizing that it is creating chaos, it is discriminating, or it is victimizing, or it is marginalizing as an organization, you have got to take an ethical stance and pull this back, refine it, and then redeploy it or remove it completely. Because mistakes happen. We're not
Mm-hmm.
perfect. We're not
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Humans are making this technology. We're imperfect, so we're never going to make the perfect algorithm. But we must always have those ethical guardrails in there to put those red flags up when something is wrong and to be able to make the requisite intervention in real time to ensure if there is harm, there is redress. And moving forward, no further harm is going to be created. And that is what is critical. And if someone has done something with intent, and with motive to create an algorithm that is destructive, then there must be enforcement of particular laws to ensure that that person really has
Is
to,
yeah,
held
is upheld.
responsible for
Yeah.
what they have done.
In a corporate side, it will be easier because you can tell a story to a customer. May not be a harm done. You might have overpriced, or you might have not sold a product for whatever reason, or you might have not hired somebody. So the level of harm or the level of impact may not be that much. But let's
Let's
say
don't
in
say that. Let's don't say that. The level of impact is always relative because if you've sold a customer something and that customer only had X amount of
depends
money
upon the
from their
product.
budget and they
Yeah.
needed to buy something for their child or for their health or for their family and that didn't work, that person may not have the resources to buy something else again or to use their credit card again for another
Mm.
purchase while you're telling them a refund is going to take 60 to 90 days, right? We don't know. We don't
I am
know.
getting corrected today, so that's
You
good.
know? So I'm
This
just saying that harm,
the definition of harm is also a question.
we've got to look at that because
Yeah.
depending on the resources that you have, things impact you in a very different way. And that's one of the critical things about ethics and equity is really understanding the individual in his or her
Context.
environment. And that is what diversity is all about.
Very, very well put in. The way I was going to that, okay, in corporate sector, you can you do cause harm. So my case is short, but the level of harm which can happen in criminal justice is far more. Uh,
Well,
I
yes, so
was trying
criminal
to
justice
illustrate that.
definitely it's about life and liberty. So if an
Yes.
algorithm incarcerates you and you're not able to face that algorithm or to get into that black box because the vendor says this is our proprietary right, this is our intellectual property, this is our
Hmm.
trade secret, we are not sharing this with you. So if an algorithm has been the mechanism by which you are being denied parole or your human rights or your civil rights, what do? You can't see an algorithm.
Yep.
We can't put an algorithm on the stand and say, face off your accuser. But there is a vendor that has created this technology, and you have the right to know. You
Yep.
have the right to know. And these are some of the cases we're seeing in the court, trade secret versus life a liberty. So these are critical things. But we've got to look at it across the board when it comes to harm and when it comes to the kinds of risks that could be created by a piece of technology. And we've got to pay particular attention. So this is why stakeholder engagement is so critical. This is why
Hmm.
public engagement and public education and public awareness is so critical when it comes to the development and deployment of a very powerful suite of technologies such as artificial intelligence.
Switching gears and moving into your Trinidad Tobago to New York, how did that transition happen? And how being a sports commentator to being focused on criminal justice, how did that transition? What motivated you?
Well, actually, I got to New York because my mother is, or at that time, she's retired now, was a diplomat for
Oh,
the
nice.
government of Trinidad and Tobago. And she was posted to New York to take duties up at the United Nations. And at that time, the opportunity presented itself for me to now leave that career that I was doing so well with
Hmm.
my high school credentials to pursue my degree, and
Okay.
that's how I got to New York, and my world changed yet again. So I started to go to university. I started to engage at an entirely different level. I started to work in the entertainment industry, in fashion, in public relations, in marketing, in communication. So I got a very solid media background, looking at the many sides of media. And then I entered, I did my undergrad. I did in media studies and journalism,
Hmm.
politics, and philosophy, a special honors curriculum that was designed for science and philosophy. So I think that's what I do right now. I have the science and the philosophy. I have the politics and how things are done in society. And I think my communication and journalism skills keep me always intellectually curious. And people always say I have a great way of communicating tough scientific topics and just breaking them down. So I think everything came together. Then after that, I was working in therapy. I had
Okay.
become a substance abuse therapist and rehabilitation
Wow.
specialist, working in the criminal justice system, working with treatment programs that individuals who were addicted to substances would enter instead of facing jail time or being sentenced. So I spent a lot of time working with rehabilitation and helping people transition and helping people build their lives back, which is so important. And while I was doing that, I started to study criminology. And while I was studying criminology, I also did a joint master's in terrorism studies and the
Wow.
psychodynamics of terrorism. And then I started to do more and more stuff in forensics, investigative psychology, and I love knowledge, and I
Hmm.
believe that
I can clearly
knowledge
see that. I can
knowledge
clearly
is
see.
about sharing, and
Yeah.
it all comes together. And this is what diversity is about. It is
Yeah.
about perspective. It is about your worldview. It is about your cosmology. It's about who you are culturally as well, who you are as an identity. So in Trinidad and Tobago, I come from a mixed family. My family is a mix of African and Indian. So my
Oh, nice.
ancestors are also from India. So I have that diversity in everything that I do, the thing that I eat, the thing that I cook, the ceremonies and the things that we celebrate. In Trinidad and Tobago, we celebrate everything from
Yeah.
Diwali to Eid. So I can cook Indian food. I could light a diya. I
Wow.
could pray. I could do, because this is who we are. So this is why a multicultural perspective is so important, because this
It
is
is.
what the world looks like.
Yeah,
This is
it
what the
is.
world looks like. The world doesn't look like one guy on a laptop in Silicon Valley. The world looks like all of us. And that is the diversity and the beauty of the diversity. And this is what I say: with diversity, we can stretch the ethical imagination of AI and create a legacy that is going to make us so proud as a society.
There's one more thing tagged to your profile, the history first data activist. I've heard about different activists, but a data activist. And this is in residence with University of Virginia. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's
Uh,
perfect. Yes, you're right. You're very correct.
and what is the role of a data activist? is I know what activism is, but data now when you apply that, it can mean many things to it.
Well, I think much of us have realized that data rights will be the civil rights movement of this
I agree.
generation.
It is.
Okay. So when you think of any movement, you think of the activists and the voices that help build that movement. So when we think about something like civil rights in the United States, we think of different individuals. You know, we think of student organizers led
Mm-hmm.
by another great Trinidadian by the name of Stokely Carmichael from SNCC, later known in life as Kwame Ture, and how
Yep.
powerful he was organizing in the South and getting Black Americans to vote. You think of Dr. Martin Luther King, you know, you think of Rosa Parks, you think of Maya Angelou, you think of people who have been activists in the work that they do. So data activism is just like that. And I really credit the University of Virginia with really being so visionary and understanding the critical role ethics plays to the data scientist. So I say, as a data activist, I am the conscience of the data scientist. So my role is to help that individual who is into data science build a more diverse consciousness and to apply a requisite level of vigilance to the work that's being done to ensure duty of care
Yep.
and due process are critical to the design of an algorithm. So a data activist is about activism, is about
Mm-hmm.
advocacy, and a critical part of advocacy is media advocacy and going out there and building public education and public awareness through public engagement, you know, engaging a variety of stakeholders. And it's about evangelism. It's about going out there and speaking about data and bringing people into the fold so people could start to understand, because people don't see their data. People don't
Mm-hmm.
see their data. People don't
Yeah.
see their how their data is being used. People don't
Yeah.
see the profiles that are being created about them because of their data. And they often don't know that their data is being monetized, as well
Yeah.
as their data could be weaponized against them. So my role as a data activist is really to look at how data interacts with society and to help us bring those ethical guardrails that are required. But I am working on a particular project at the University of Virginia that looks at mass surveillance technologies and intrusive technologies,
Mm-hmm.
focusing on privacy and security and ensuring we find ways to embolden communities. So
Mm-hmm.
let them know how their data is being used, how their data can be weaponized. And it's a great way to reimagine American policing. So the tool that I'm designing with a team from the School of Data Science, a brilliant team of master's students who are data scientists and
Nice.
professors who are data scientists who are working with me on this project, because what it's really going to do, as I said, it's going to reimagine policing. It's going to empower communities. It's going to empower individuals. It's going to bring a unique perspective to the ways in which we police using mass surveillance technologies, and it's going to bring a very high level of public oversight when it comes to surveillance technology. So it's a position that I'm very excited about at the University of Virginia. And you're going to see more and more data activist positions and residencies going to be created at universities. So UVA really leading the way there.
That's amazing, and I look forward to hearing about it and listening more about it because, there's always this thought, okay, and you spoke about this app piece, like as consumers, as customers, today we don't know how our data is being leveraged, what kind of personas are being created, uh, and monetized. I may be naive as a consumer giving out my data, not knowing that I'm being every data I give, there's somebody earning a cent over every piece of my data. So how can enterprise, like you are talking about mass surveillance and you're talking about leveraging ethics and big application of data activism in large mass surveillance, but how can enterprises adopt that practice? Because you there are so many stories being floated around, many large corporates not following that. So how do organizations embrace that?
I usually say end the ethics washing, stop the ethics window dressing, and end it with all that ethical theater, because I always say some of the best ethical frameworks, some of the prettiest data visualization techniques that are being used to deploy these frameworks, it's not authentic. Let's be authentic, because one of the things, now I worked in crisis communication and risk management in corporate for quite some time. So I've dealt with companies that have had their reputation pretty much
Mm-hmm.
under the gun, right?
Yeah.
And who've had to find real ways in real time to build back their reputation. So you don't want it to get to a crisis. And you never want your customers to wake up and say, wait a minute, this company has been ripping me off. Right? You
Yeah.
don't ever want to get there. So
Yeah.
from the C-suite
Mm.
straight down to the street where people walk into the retail space, if we ever get back to that, or if they're doing it online shopping wherever, you've got to bring an ethical approach. So the organization itself must embrace an ethical culture. They must be authentic, and they must be courageous in the things that they're going to do when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to ethics, and they must provide the requisite level of public education and public awareness and the disclaimers, and don't overpromise with the
Yeah.
technology. And if something is done inaccurately, it's okay to say we didn't do the due diligence. We're going to pull this back, and we're going to bring something out that is improved. Understand the culture that you're working with, the data culture, the digital culture, the ethical culture, and you really want to develop something. So that's when I say that level of intellectual confrontation that is critical in the C suite, and that moves into the design space, that
Mm-hmm.
runs throughout the life cycle of
Mm-hmm.
the product, is
Um,
critical, or the policy or the program. It is important. So what you want to develop are ethical emerging technologists who
okay.
understand the responsibility that they have. You're not just designing a tool, or you're just not designing a process. You are designing a legacy technology that can impact communities in real ways. So when I speak, when I work with organizations within the corporate space, it's really about building that consciousness, really about speaking
Okay.
about those roles and responsibilities and the rights, and understanding you're not going to lose money. You're not going to lose money. And I always say that ethics and innovation can happen at the same time.
Hmm.
One is not, ethics is not going to sacrifice innovation. Inclusive technology is what you
Interesting.
want to strive for, because when it is
That sounds.
inclusive, it is definitely more distinctive and more diverse and more dynamic. And I always use the analogy of music.
Hmm.
What would this world be today if we didn't have hip hop, R&B, country and western, rock and roll? What would we have been when it came to our music and to our culture? So why do
Be
we
black
want
and
to,
white.
exactly, why do we want to stifle, or Bollywood, or Bangra, right?
Yeah.
How can we exist without Bollywood? I mean, Bollywood
Hmm.
has become so much a part of who we are as a world right now, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So if we didn't have all of that, or in New York, the beauty of coming to New York is that you can have Indian food, you could
Yeah.
have Caribbean food, you could have, your jerk chicken, you could
Yeah.
go to Jackson Heights and have some of the best Indian food ever.
Yeah.
You can have sushi, you can have Russian, you can have American. That's what people came to Manhattan for.
I agree.
That's what people came to New York for. It is that diversity that we get from
All over the place.
all cultures. And that's what we've got to use this technology to build. And that's what we need to create it, because it makes the world a more exciting place.
Wow. Is there anybody whom you look up to as a mentor, coach, or somebody who you would like to be or whom you follow?
Okay, I think there are lots of people. I think it starts first with my parents.
Hmm.
I think one of the things that I think one of my advantages has been that I had mentors at home.
Nice.
My mother, who was doing extraordinary work at the United Nations, my father, who in Trinidad and Tobago had an extraordinary history when it came to sport. He also played internationally in the
Oh
60s
wow,
in Atlanta with the Atlanta Chiefs and then with the New York Cosmos. And he played in
nice.
Mexico, and he has a great history of playing soccer. And I think I've always had my parents, who were young parents, doing things and really building their lives and so committed to their country and so committed to their communities. And those things are really important for me. So I think I saw what justice looked like in my mom and my dad, and what giving back looked like. And I think with my parents, they always said, you know it's always about doing the right thing. It's always
Hmm.
about doing the right thing. And I think that has been critical to me. But then in my career, I have had some excellent mentors. In my college life, I had a wonderful professor, a very dynamic, powerful African American woman by the name of Dr. Estella Majozo. And she really brought me face to face with some very powerful writings. And one of the things that we're seeing right now, and I'll just go back in AI ethics, would really be women of color who have stepped up to the plate. Joy Bulamwini, Timna Jabru, Deborah Raji. There's so many of them. Dr. Sophia Noble, even so many of them who have been on the front line of ethics. Because oftentimes we see when something goes wrong, it always impacts brown and black people first. We've seen
Unfortunately,
that historically, right? So
yeah.
I think, and then in life, I was able to meet Dr. Maya Angelou, and
Hmm.
she really had an extraordinary impact on me. And there was Dr. Kathleen Cleaver, who was an original member of the Black Panthers. So I think
Yep.
I've been able to meet a very diverse group of people who have inspired me. And then in criminology, Dr. David Brotherton, who's one of the greatest critical thinkers when it comes to criminal justice and understanding gun and gang activity and understanding how the gangs are a part of the community and bringing a very unique, radical, and revolutionary approach to the gang as a political entity, to really understanding how do we inform this. And even right now in this space, I'm meeting so many dynamic individuals who have
Hmm.
been part of my development when it comes into this space.
Wow.
We've got to think about it, and in the sense that who have really inspired me and continue to support me. And I'm really getting an extraordinary support from the AI community, because I think in the AI community, we have realized the importance of
Of
advocacy
ethics.
and the
Yep.
importance of building public awareness and educating the public. Because in everything we do,
Yeah.
from corporate to government to academia, every project, every policy, an educated public
Yeah.
is critical to
Yeah.
the advancement of any society.
Very well said. And how quickly can we scale that up? I think time will say, because education is important. Just changing the, the coin on its head and talking about you, you've impacted many people's careers because uh, you've done rehabilitation of folks who've had situations, you've interacted with many people. Have there been moments or a moment which you really cherish, which when you look back and you say, and pushes you forward and saying, no, I am on the right path? Is there any
Every
one or
day,
two?
every day I get letters and emails and notes and text messages from individuals who I've spent some time with, who tell me where they are in their career, and they thank me for that. And it really is a beautiful thing to know that you could have said something, or you could have given some sort of encouragement, or you could have sat with someone and just really helped them design a new way there. Or sometimes I've helped people design an exit strategy, because I worked with individuals who were involved in domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and
Wow.
people who were in situations of danger. So sometimes an exit strategy is also a strategy that needs to be
Hmm?
designed. So And I don't do what I do to even get those responses. It's just something that's so natural. I think I've always said I've been called to serve, and it's something that I've done ever since I've been a child, with my friends, with my own associates. There's something about people winning, and maybe it comes back to sport, that just
Yeah.
makes me smile. It's something about people being successful that makes me smile. And I always say my job is like in a relay. All I'm there to do is just hand that baton over. And once you take it, you run. And I'm going to be there just waiting to see you cross the finish line. And I just want so many people to cross the finish line. And sometimes, in life, people take some wrong turns, but
Yeah.
my job is always to bring people back on that right road. So that's why I always say conversations change lives. Every life has a story that could be a lesson for someone else to move forward.
On that beautiful note, Renee, this has been an amazing conversation. I have been corrected in many ways about my perspectives on ethics and AI, and I'm sure I will take many of these learnings from today's conversation, as I am a practitioner and an executive who's driving a lot of AI initiatives. So this conversation has been really helpful for me. And I'm sure my listeners probably will reach out or will love to have more conversations with you, hopefully. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. And, you know,
Thank you
I'm
so much
lost
for
with words.
having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you. And keep doing what you're doing. You're changing the world as well.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words.
Thank you for listening in. And we close yet another episode of Masters Decoded. If you've enjoyed the episode, please, you can help us out by sharing it on social media. I would personally appreciate that. It's how we can reach more listeners, and the more listeners we have, the more awesome guests I can get in touch and convince to participate in these conversations that are a joy to have for me, and I hope they are a joy for you to listen as well. You can also help a lot leaving reviews on iTunes or your podcast service of choice. Reviews are surprisingly helpful in supporting the podcast to get to more listeners. If this episode has intrigued you, I would request you to subscribe to the podcast to stay up to date and get notified to the future episodes. With that, I bid you and see you in the next episode.